All right, we're here. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to Capital Races Club interview with Jeff Greenberg today. Today's host is Samson. Hi, everybody. Um, Jeff, um, would you like to start with how did your journey start in the commercial real estate space? Because that's always fun.
Well, my journey started, I guess, I started to do single family homes, but I was trying to do REOs, which is properties that were already owned by the bank. They were already foreclosed on. And it was not a real good time to be doing that. The bank, this was about in 2006, 2007 in California. And the banks didn't know what to do with all the properties that they were foreclosing on, and it took too long to do anything you wanted to buy. And by the time the banks were responding, um, the price had gone down because the value of properties out where I am in California, the price was going down too fast, and so it just wasn't working well. It was like catching a falling knife, you know. It was trying to get it. So I heard somebody talking about multifamily, which I hadn't heard about in any of the real estate clubs that I had gone to. Everybody was talking about buy and hold, fix and flip, that kind of thing. Nobody was really talking about large multifamilies. And then when I heard that I could get into large multifamily and not just have to rely on my own money, because I only had a limited amount of money at the time, um, that excited me that I could use other people's money to leverage my money and to get into deals and to continue on from there. So that was kind of where I got started. I actually went and listened to a guru, and I was in a mentoring program, and then I went from there and started buying. First property I ever bought other than my own house, my own personal residence, was a 20 unit property in Texas.
Whoa,
So that
that's
was
quite a
and
jump from
that
one
was that
to
was a syndicated deal.
yeah, that's quite a jump from first. I mean, doing single family to 20 units. Did your mentor or how did you get the courage or the push to make that jump? That's quite a large.
Well, it was scary. It was definitely scary. Um, and my partner was in the same position I was in. She was new at it, and that was something that, the two of us were in the same place, which is not exactly something I recommend. And when we talk later, as far as things I've done, but things that I would have done differently, being partnering right away with somebody that was in the exact same spot as I was, probably wasn't the best idea, because we were both learning.
Yeah.
But anyway, together we got brave enough to put an offer on that 20 unit property, and then we had to raise $350,000, and we were scared to death because we had never raised money before. We thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was, and so we successfully did that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a property that a broker had brought to us, and we were ready to go on. It was off market at the time.
Well, how did you? I mean, you said that you had a mentor in the beginning that helped you out, maybe coaching. Um, how would you suggest for people who are watching this thinking that, hey, commercial real estate, that sounds like fun, let's try it out? What would you say? Would you rather just, yeah, try it out, see where the chips land, or would you rather go with the route of, hey, go with somebody with experience? You said that you mentioned that your partner also had um, limited experience. What would you say is a good way to start?
Well, I definitely feel you need a mentor. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go and pay a $20,000 program or a $30,000 program, or you even have to be paying for coaching. But somehow you need to be involved with someone that's got more experience than you. Now, there's a lot that you can learn on podcasts. When I was starting this, the only podcast that I knew of was the real estate radio guys, and they're still around. I didn't know about Bigger Pockets until years later. And at that time, also Bigger Pockets, most of the talk that you saw was on single family stuff. It was all on residential. Very few people were talking about multifamily. Um, but anyway, as far as getting started, obviously listening to a lot of podcasts. There's some great books out there now that weren't out there then, to get the basics. I think, and when people come up to me and say, "Hey, will you mentor me?" The first thing I do is I say, "Look, you go read this book, and come back, and once you have some basic knowledge on understanding the concept of commercial real estate, and then once you have that understanding, kind of evaluate your own resources." And your own resources you may have a technical background where you are really good with spreadsheets, you're good at analyzing deal, or maybe you're good with people and you could talk to people and you could build relationships, and or you just have time to sit there and make phone calls. I tell people, look at your own resources. What are you good at? What can you offer to somebody that has experience? And go and offer yourself up and say, here, this is what I want to do. I don't care what I make off these deals. I want to, right now, I want to work with you and to learn from you and get into a few deals alongside of somebody. That's typically what I tell people. Even those people that go out and pay for high price mentoring programs, a lot of times they don't do anything. You still need the motivation to actually act, to take action, and that's a critical piece. Take action first, learn from books, podcasts, meetups, whatever, and then you're at least at a much higher level where you can start learning more.
That sounds like a great start. What kind of books or what books would you say are the fundamentals for commercial real estate investing?
Well, there's a couple books that I like. I mean, Dave Lindahl, Multifamily Millions, is a good basic book that will give you some basic knowledge um, on it. The other one I like is Brian Burke. Brian's out of Northern California, and he and I used to write a lot on Bigger Pockets, and that's how I met him, was on Bigger Pockets. But he's written a great book called The Hands Off Investor, and Brian did a great job of it. It's mainly focusing on those people that want to be passive investors, but even for those people that want to be active investors, there's a lot of information in there, what you should know on evaluating a deal and what investors are going to be looking for as well if you're planning on bringing investors into the business. So it's just an all around great book to be looking at to get the basics.
And what would be those are phenomenal books, by the way. What would be the next step for somebody? Okay, now I've read these. Now I want some more actionable. Are those books sort of like, okay, now I've got the Bibles, or I have the fundamentals of commercial real estate. Now I can go and create my team, or what would you say is would be the best next step after that?
Well, the next thing is networking. This is not a lone person's business. You're going to want a team. The first teammates I think would be best is someone that's got, that's several steps ahead of you, and that's why I was talking about what are your resources and what do you bring to the table. So somebody that has a lot of experience is going to be willing to take you on. So you need to bring something to the table so you can get in the door. And by doing that, by providing some value, you get to work alongside of somebody with more experience. And you do a couple deals with that person, and that's going to be the best education that you can get. And sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. You might learn what you're not supposed to do or what you shouldn't do. When I the first time I invested as a passive investor, I learned a lot about what not to do because I wasn't pleased with the sponsor and some of the things that, well, that mainly their communication with investors was pretty weak. But it's much you learn a lot more. At least I learned a lot more when I was working a lot alongside of somebody rather than sitting in a boot camp taking down notes.
What do you say are some of the main mistakes that new investors make in our industry, and what are some lessons that they could learn already just by hearing this conversation today?
Well, I think that one of the biggest mistakes people have is thinking that it's going to be easy, that listening to a lot of the hype a lot of times says how easy it is, and you listen to all these successes and how wonderful it is that people are getting 40% IRRs or whatever, and nobody really brags about the things that went wrong. And so there's a couple of podcasts out there that are kind of a good thing to listen to. Um, there was one that was what was it called? How to Lose Your Money, and basically it was just talking about mistakes people had made in the business. And I think you learn a lot more from mistakes than you do from successes. And hopefully there's somebody else's mistakes, not yours.
Yeah,
And so if you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, you can protect yourself down the road. I mean, there's a lot of things that could go wrong in the business. I mean, you can overpay, you can buy a property that has a lot more deferred maintenance than you expected. You could be underfunded. The loan comes due too quickly, and you're not going to be able to perform and get things done in order to refi, or the market's going to change. I mean, there's so many different things, and that's where experience comes in. And that's where dealing with someone that's been there and done that ahead of you, that you could protect yourself.
that's sounds like great lessons to learn before getting into it. I mean, learning the hard way is yeah, you can definitely learn beforehand. Hey, we have Lee and Florian in the audience. Hey, feel free to comment your questions if you have any thoughts. That way we can get to those later on. We're going to continue. Um, so you said some of the mistakes are focused on um, underfunded, not inexperienced, and other things. So you also mentioned briefly the importance of relationships. So, to you, what's the number one? Wait, let me ask you this. I think this is the question that I asked you the first time we met, you and I on Clubhouse. If everything that you've worked on for the past, since you started in commercial real estate, everything that you worked on is gone. You don't have your contacts, you don't have your assets, and you have to start from scratch. Where would you focus in order to build back what you already have accomplished? Where would you focus first?
Well, the relationships is what I would need. That would, when you say losing your contacts, that would be the hardest thing. And because if you would have left your question without taking that away from me, you could lose all your assets, you could lose all your money. It's the contacts that are of the greatest value, and as well as your knowledge, of course. And so I would have to start there, and I would start building up my contacts again, as far as the people that I know I could work with and help out, and the investors that have invested with me in the past and would be coming with me in the future. That would be the greatest loss, is losing my network, because that's your greatest value.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds. I think that's a great lesson for anybody who's listening to this. That relationships are key to this business. And we have a great question from Lee Johnson. He's asking, Jeff, how would you perform due diligence on an operator with no prior relationship with?
Um, I would interview them if I didn't have any relationship with them at all. Uh, the main thing, and I have a list of questions that I ask the sponsors, and just a little segue that I do have those questions available, and Samson can make that available as far as how to get a hold of those. But anyway, I want to know about their business. I want to know about their track record. I want to know who is running the deal. The biggest priority to me on any deal is their experience. Who is going to be operating the deal? So I'd want to talk to people that have worked with them. So as far as part of my due diligence, not just the investors, because if I ask for referrals to their investors, of course they're going to give me the ones that are happy about it, their relationship with them. I might not, and I might not even get real investors. It could be their brother, or their wife, or whatever. As far as referrals, but just finding other people that have worked with them, other professionals that have worked with them. I'm actually in a mastermind um, that there's just a group of us that get together and talk about deal sponsors. We just talk about who would they work with, who wouldn't they work with. Um, that's it's a good way just to learn about that. And I was actually on a there was a an interview with Jeremy Roll yesterday, and that was one of the things that I was asking him, as far as does he have a list of people that he really likes working with? And I think that's an important thing, is getting referrals from other other syndicators or people in the business. Is what do you think about some of these other people?
That sounds like a great first step also. I mean, asking first and then finding out more about them. And the list of questions that you ask your sponsors, we just attach that to this video. So I'm not going to name exactly, but if you look at the video right now on YouTube, you will see that we linked that. All right, super cool. What would you say are some of the ways that you moved from, wait, let's go back. What are, when you started out, that first 20 unit in Texas, was that an active deal for you, or was it a passive one? How did you get into that one? You said you had a relationship with a broker and it was an off market. Um, how did you work that out? Were you an active or a passive operator on that one?
That was my first active. I was in one other deal passive,
Okay.
which was a huge 700 unit deal that I was in as a passive investor. And I talk about that on that interview we were talking about with Bigger Pockets.
Yeah.
But this was our first active deal, and my partner and I purchased that 20 unit. The funny thing is the relationship was with the broker that I had met through LoopNet, which I tell a lot of people. You may not find deals on LoopNet, but you could find brokers on LoopNet, and there are deals. I've actually bought at least one deal that was on LoopNet. So there are sometimes deals on LoopNet, but this was a broker I had been trying to work with for like 2 years. That the bank came to him because of a previous relationship the bank had with him, and he came to me. So right there, you've got two sets of relationships that got that deal to me: his
Yeah.
relationship with the bank and the bank's relationship. Um, and so that, you know, I can't emphasize enough. It's about relationships. that makes the business go round.
Yeah, that sounds like a great segue also too. When you said your first deal was as a limited partner, as a passive investor, in what ways did you learn from that? That hey, these are all the things that are happening in the background that I have to think about when I'm communicating to my investors. What lessons did you learn and experiences did you have with that investment?
Well, the main thing was is that the communication wasn't great. They just didn't let us know when things were going on. I mean, we did have a quarterly meeting, um, but it just, I don't know, there just wasn't a lot of communication. They did something at the end of the deal without letting us know about it that wasn't really in the agreement. I mean, there was a problem with the sale of the property, and they decided to go ahead and do owner finance without even letting us know. So we were supposed to be out of the deal in 5 years, and now they were tying us up for another 5 years, carrying the loan for the new buyer. And nobody asked us about it. So there was a bunch of the people tried to get together and try to sue, to sue the deal sponsor to try to get our money back, because he could have afforded, he was able to afford to buy us out, but he didn't, and he kept us in there. And not only that, he was still making money because the I think that the guy was we were carrying a 6% loan or something, and we were only getting 5%. So he was getting a percentage just for us carrying the loan. And so there was a lot of bad feelings going on. So it was just, you know, I want to be with a deal sponsor that is upfront, is full disclosure, lets you know good, bad, and ugly. You know, lets you know as soon as possible when there's where something bad's going on, and that's just fair to investors. And I would just give a shout out to any of my investors. I've had the most phenomenal investors over the past 12 years that we communicate with them, and we've had bad times, and not a peep of discontent. And I attribute that a lot to the fact that we were completely open as much as possible. And so they just understood that we were trying to do the best we could for them and put them in front of ourselves and in front of what might have been best for us, that it's what's best for them and the deal. And then you have happy investors that are going to stay with you for a long time.
Yeah, it sounds like a great lesson learned from an experience that wasn't. I mean, it sounds like a tough experience, and you turned that around completely and made something very valuable out of it, where your investors are now uh, better cared for thanks to that. So, what are some when you said that you went from the LP, from the passive side to the active side? Um, what are some pros and cons? Would you say with passive side? Let's start there. What would you say are some pros and cons that you find with? Let's start with pros first, or let's start with yeah, whichever you prefer.
Well, on the passive side, the pros are that you don't really, once you've done your due diligence on the deal sponsor and the deal, and once you've done that part, there's very little left for you to do.
Yeah,
Keeping looking at things every quarterly, attending the quarterly meetings is recommended, and looking over the financials as you get them and asking questions is recommended. But if you don't, that's you don't have to. So for the busy professional, um, they don't have to do any of that stuff, and they're still going to get their checks. Um, like I said, I do recommend people keeping an eye on things and asking the right questions. Um, the cons are you're giving up control. You're giving up the control of making decisions, because typically as an LP, you have very little in the way of voting rights. You have very little that you can do to make changes in any of the decisions that the sponsor wants to do. You're hoping you made the right decisions in the beginning and did all your due diligence and bet on the proper person and the proper company and the proper deal. But you're kind of along for the ride after that. So that's the thing. Me personally, that's the best way to go. I would much rather be doing that than just be doing the passive side of it. And that's where I'm heading right now. That's more of what I'm doing at this point, is doing more on the passive side, letting somebody else do the work. But first, I'm going to do my work up front to make sure I trust that person. And
Yeah.
once I've got that trust, then I'd much rather let them do all the work.
That sounds so. What would be some of the pros and cons with active investing? You almost alluded to that. Would you like to go into detail?
Well, the pros are obviously you have the control. You have the control. You eventually, once you get good at the business, you'll start making some good money. You'll probably make a bigger percentage of each of the deals than, as far as your investors are going to be making. But you've got a lot of work. Either, and it takes a team. You've got you've got the finding the deal, you've got financing the deal, closing on the deal, and then once you actually acquire the deal, people you say, "Wow, you made it to the finish line." No, you didn't make it to the finish line. You made it to the starting line. That's
Yeah.
like having to park your car 5 miles away so you can get into the marathon race, and you had to fight traffic to get to the line. And now you finally fought all the traffic and you finally got to the starting line. And now you're starting. So it's then you've got operations. You've got all the operations, taking care of the property, taking care of investors, communicating with them. There's a lot of work involved, and there's a lot of people that are very excited about doing that part of it and are very good at doing those kind of things. And so you just have to decide what parts of the business are exciting to you and what your resources will allow you to do, or what new resources you need to get. If you need to make more money to come in as a passive investor, or you need to become more educated in order to be an active investor, you just have to decide what's best for you, what works for you. um, I've made a big change in my life, that I've been a active investor for the past 12 years, and now I'm going more to the passive side, that I'm helping passive investors get into deals. And to me, that's a lot more fun. I get to spend a lot of time talking to people and enjoying educating people on this business and going into other deals. And once we get into the deal, there's not a lot for us to do. We sit and watch and advise and can voice our opinions, but there's a lot less work for us to do. And I'm, at my age, I'm enjoying that a lot more.
It sounds like you make your money work harder for you now, but in order to get there, you first worked for it by being active. So is that something that would summarize the pros and cons?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that's true in any business. Anytime you're going to start up a business, you're going to be working your butt off and putting in lots and lots of hours to begin with. But if you can get into that, build the business up and create systems and other people doing all different activities that aren't necessary for you, then maybe you could pull back a little bit and enjoy your life. I think most people just keep on driving and driving and driving, and and if they enjoy that, and if that's what they want to do it, more power to them. I've just made the decision that life is too short, and that's why I've picked the path that I'm on now, because I was doing this before, but I was just doing all the other things as well. So I'm just dumping off a lot of those other parts to other people and just doing the part I like, which is working with investors and helping investors get into quality deals. And that's just the path I took.
Great. Thank you. We have a question from Lee Johnson. He's asking about, I typically look at the debt service coverage ratio plus preferred return as an investment criteria. What measures do you use before moving forward with an investment?
Well, first of all, I just want to clarify that the first number one thing has nothing to do with any of those. The number one thing to me is the deal sponsor. Okay, that's number one. I'm not even going to bother to look at any of the other thing until I know who the people are. People bring me deals and say, "Here, it's a 15 IRR, it's an 18 IRR, any of that stuff," and I say, "Who's the deal sponsor?" I want to know who the deal sponsor is. What have they done in the past? What's their track record? Who's going to be running operations? Okay. With that said, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to look at it. And typically, I'm going to look at the IRR. Now, I know that a lot of people will be looking at cash on cash return, and that's important to a lot of people. So, the cash on cash return, as far as um, what they're going to be getting immediately, is important. Now, as far as the debt coverage, um, the the main concern I have is with the safety of the deal. And so there's where your debt, for those of you that don't know what Lee was asking there, the debt coverage service ratio is, essentially if you've got 100, or if you've got a loan and you've got to pay $1,000 a month, then, how much income do you have to cover that? And so let's say 100 a month. So it makes the math a little easier. So most lenders are going to want you to have $135 to cover that $100 payment. Okay, so you got that extra $35 or 35% um, to cover, in addition to what your debt coverage is. And sometimes they'll go down to 25. So it could be a debt coverage of 125, 1.25. But that's the main thing. So um, my bigger concern is typically what is their break even number? If things go haywire, what could they get their occupancy down to and still pay the bills? And typically you see on most multifamily deals is about a 70% occupancy. So if you start seeing something where there's an 80% occupancy as your break even, that's getting kind of scary. I would rather my break even be down below 70. And if you can get that, I mean, I had a deal that we took it over at 85% occupied. We knew there was a good percentage of people that were not paying, that were way behind in their rent. And that's a critical thing to look at when you're looking at the rent rolls. People look at the rent rolls and they say, "Oh yeah, okay, here's what they're paying." But the most important column in that rent roll is, what are these people behind? If you see people behind over a month and you get into 2 months, the likelihood that they're going to catch up is extremely slim. So you look at those and you figure, okay, those people aren't paying. Those people are going to be out once you take over. So if you see too many of those, you've got a problem. And the buyer, or excuse me, the seller may have thrown in a whole bunch of other people just to get the occupancy up. They may have said, "Hey, come on in, just occupy the unit, and don't worry about paying. I just need the occupancy up." And so you may see a lot of that. So you also want to look at see when people came in. That's usually a date in that um, in your rent roll is when they started, when they moved in, and you see a whole pile of people that just came in and you know 3 months before or 4 months before they're selling it, you get real suspicious. But anyway, on the big concern, as I said, is um, what is the break even occupancy and is there enough play in there? The other thing that I'm going to look at is what kind of reserves are they have? Yes, sensitivity analysis. I can't talk right now,
A
but yes,
sense.
a
Yeah.
sensitivity analysis.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. 65% is a good stress if you're talking break even. Yes, that's an excellent point. Um, but also on the sensitivity analysis, what are their projections? So the IRR and the cash on cash return don't mean a lot if they can't reach some of their assumptions. You got to look at what are the assumptions, and then you could have a sensitivity analysis. So a lot of times you'll see a chart that depending on what the percentage of increase in revenue they get, and what cap rate they're projecting if they don't get if the cap rate goes higher, um, where does that put you? But the one thing that I want to emphasize is pro formas are beautiful. That's great. You could put pro formas out there. I could give you a beautiful pro forma. I could give you all kinds of numbers, but those are numbers. What are the numbers based on? How realistic are those numbers? And that's where I go back to the deal sponsor. That's where I go back to the integrity and the experience and the values of the deal sponsor that are going to do the best that they can in their projections. And there's one deal sponsor that I work with that she gives very low projections. And I have investors come in and say, "Well, I could get more on this other deal. I'm looking at this other deal. It's got a higher IRR. It's got a higher cash on cash." I said, "Okay, fine. Let's compare at the end. What happened. I mean, they may successfully get there, but um, I want someone that's got a realistic projections, and so I want to know what's underneath those projections. And do I trust the people that are making those projections? That's my big thing. If I see somebody that doesn't track how successful they are on living up to their performance, you know, then what does it matter? Yes, the devil's in the details. Trust but verify, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Uh, but yes, absolutely. And most passive investors don't do that. And that's where I try to put myself where I can help those passive investors out.
Before we go to the next question from the audience, I would like to ask, how do you do that now? You're still active, but you're doing more of the passive work where you're raising capital, investor relations. So, how do you help passive investors out getting into these deals that sometimes may look, um, according to the pitch decks and pro formas, you're vetting them and making sure that your investors are going the right direction. So, what ways are you doing that? Are you okay? A new investor is in the audience looking at this right now. How do they invest with you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I've got two tracks, a lot fewer than when I was actively running the deals. My two tracks is one, I'm looking for good quality deal sponsors. And right now I'm dealing with one that I've worked with before and I know her well. And there's a few others, some people that I've been in masterminds with and I've known them for quite some time. So I'm looking at seeing what deals they're bringing in, and I'm still looking for other quality deal sponsors. And then the other end of it is I'm putting myself out. I'm putting myself out here with you, Samson. I've put myself out in Clubhouse. I have meetups and I'm on podcasts just to let investors meet me. And as investors meet me, they can contact me and we can get on a conversation and see what their goals are and what they're looking for, and then get them involved in some of the deals that I'm seeing. But that's what I'm doing. But I'm narrowed down to the two tracks rather than all the other things that I had to do and find deals and all the rest of that stuff. So now I do have a few properties that I'm still the asset manager on, and I'm selling those off. Not just because I don't want to be active, more that those most of those are 6 years old and it's time to sell them off. But I will be happy when I'm not the asset manager on any of my deals, so I am selling those off, and that way I will have more time to be spending just working with investors.
Sounds like a great way of also building those relationships with, hey, you are putting yourself out there, you are educating and sharing and inspiring, and yeah, that's a great way of starting those relationships with new investors and also investors that aren't new but that are new to you. So that's kudos to you, Jeff. That's a great job. We have a question from the audience from Rowena Augustin. What is your, in your opinion, what is your opinion on a sale model versus long-term hold?
Well, a lot of people have asked me that, and typically when people are coming from residential to commercial, that is a very typical question. Um, and the big thing is, especially say from residential, when you work your tail off to find a property, why the heck do you want to sell it and have to do that over again? Let's pay that thing off and let it be a cash flowing property. And I totally understand that. And a lot of people say, yeah, I mean, I've had people say, if it's a good property and it's cash flows, why would anybody sell it? In commercial properties, why the heck would you sell that?
Hmm.
And the thing is, in commercial properties, especially when we're dealing with value adds, that's where you make the money. You make the money on the sale. Now you can make some money on the refinance, but I could give you an example of the property I just sold in Amarillo. We bought it at 10.3. We put about $1.5 million into it, and we could have refied, but when we were talking to the lender, they weren't going to. They would lend to us based on the original value of the property plus what we put into it, and then they would maybe give us an 80% loan to value. Well, that wouldn't have given us nearly the amount of money that we could have gotten if we were to sell it. So here we had 11.8 into it, and the lender was only going to give us maybe 80% on that. And once we paid off the loan, the old loan, there wouldn't have been a lot in there. But we just sold it for 16.2. So we just gained, over $4 million that we were able to give our investors back their money, plus a phenomenal return in a 2.5 year hold. And now we all could move on to the next deal. So, if I'm going to give my investors I think it was a 26 IRR, and yes, people are going to have to pay taxes on it, but not if they jump into the next deal and get some depreciation from the next deal. So that's typically the way you do it in commercial real estate, is you take that money, move it on to the next deal, get a deal that's got a high depreciation that you could get the benefits of your bonus depreciation, so you're not paying taxes on it, and then you move your money along that way. And the point that I tell to passive investors is you didn't have to do all the work to find that deal. The deal sponsor is the one that's working their butt off to find the next deal. And so for a passive investor, you just have to find the right people to hang out with, to invest with, that are working their tails off in order to find the deals. And yes, it is tough to find deals nowadays, but the position I'm in right now, that's not my problem anymore. I just need to find the deal sponsors that are really good at doing that and really good at finding the deals. And I have to evaluate a lot fewer deals. Those people coming in as a passive investor, they don't have to evaluate nearly as many deals. And it's a lot easier. Those people that want to become active investors, you just need to get a team and you need to create systems and you just need to have people that know what they're doing, because this business is a lot of work. You could make a lot of money in this business as an active investor, but it's not a get rich quick. I mean, I know people that have gotten rich quick, but that's not typical. Most people work their butts off and are overnight wonders, after, 5 or 6 years, then they're overnight wonders. But, it takes time and experience.
Great answer. You're a successful investor, not just passively, but actively too. What what would you say are your character traits that have been the most instrumental for your success? What character traits do you hold uh, responsible for your success?
I won't give up.
Resilience.
um, well, I mean, one of the things, that's put me on this my current path is I realized I don't enjoy being the operator. I don't enjoy being the asset manager. So I was smart enough, and the best thing I did on that last deal that we just sold was hiring a lady to be my asset manager. That was the best thing that I have done in my career, was associating with her, and saw what she was doing. And that's why I'm raising money for her now in a deal that she's the GP on, where on the other deal, she joined me on my GP team, and I saw her perform and I saw the property management company perform. And I said, I love what they're doing,
Yeah.
but I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the one, you know, each month going through each line item on the profit and loss statement, and each time there's a problem or something that needs to be done, negotiating prices on things, whatever. Why are we above budget? Why are we below budget? Whatever it happens to be, I don't really enjoy that. And so finding partners that enjoy things, or are better at things than you are, is key to building a team. So if you want to go out there and be an active investor, you find someone that loves calling brokers and building relationships, and going out and courting the brokers, and because they're the ones where you're going to get most of your deals. There's direct mailings that you could be doing and stuff. There's a lot of stuff, but you need someone, whatever direction you're going, that is good at that and enjoys that. And you're going to need someone that's able to get the loans. Maybe they have the liquidity or the net worth, and that's somebody you typically can bring in for that kind of stuff. But you also need someone that's going to do investor relationships, who's willing to go out and talk to investors and to educate investors. And sometimes it's holding hands and helping investor figure out how to get their accreditation approved, and how to use the portal and whatever else. There's a lot of people that like operations that don't want to deal with the investors. They're a necessary part of the business, and maybe that's not their favorite. So you just need to find out what part you like and what part you're good at, and then build a team that is able to do the other pieces that maybe you don't like and aren't as good at.
Holy cow! Yeah, that sounds like a great way of making it work. Are there any insights or lessons that we haven't covered today that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I think I've said most of it, and the big thing is knowing that things, for most of us, things don't come easy. That you learn from your failures. Hopefully, you learn from other people's failures. You learn from being around other people and associating with other people, and um, it's so important. There's going to be plenty of times where you are going to think about, what the heck am I doing? Why am I doing this? It's not working for me. I'm going to quit. Um, you know, you've got to have a why. You've got to have a strong reason why you're doing this, because there's going to be plenty of times that you're going to be pressed and you're going to say, I give up. I'm done. I'm tired. I want to go do something else. I want to sit there and watch. I want to binge watch Game of Thrones, whatever it happens to be. You're going to need some reason that's going to pull you back into that computer and get back to work, or drive out to the next meetup. I mean, I had a guy, just a quick story. I had a guy call me up one time, and he lived about 20 minutes away from where I was putting on a meetup. And he says, "Oh, don't you have a meetup closer?" And he said, I said, "Wait a minute, you're 20 minutes away from the meetup." And he says, "Well, I usually don't want to go that far. Um, I don't really want to, drive that far." And I said, "Okay, don't bother with the business. If you can't drive 20 minutes, there's sometimes I'll drive 2 hours to get to a meetup, or I flew across the country from California to Florida to get to a meetup. And if you can't drive 20 minutes, then you stay out of the damn business. Don't bother. Go back to your TV set, sit there with your beer, and don't bother." So that's, maybe I was a little hard on the guy, but he showed up at my meetup one time. He showed up that night, but I never saw him again. So that is my feeling as far as the attitude needed, that if you really want to be successful in this business, then you have to do it. You have to have a why. You have to have a reason. What is it you're looking for? Retirement? Getting out of your W-2 job? Uh, having money for your kids' college? Leaving a legacy? Being able to take round the world trip with your family? Whatever, to buy a yacht. I don't know. Whatever it is, it needs to be strong enough to kick you over the edge when you're depressed and are feeling bad about yourself and your successes or failures.
That was this is live, so we don't do any editing or anything. So that was tough love and straight to the point at the same time. Um, I think it's much needed, more than the just soft petting. Hey, you can do this. You definitely need a strong why, otherwise, I mean, what?
I've been to plenty of boot camps where the guy's up on stage, everybody can do this. You can do it, and he's right. You can't, but it's up here.
Yeah,
It you don't. This business is not rocket science. It's it's a simple business. The math isn't that hard. Um, it's not a complicated business, but so anybody can do it. But the question is will they do it? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, and we'd have even more competition.
yeah.
I mean, the business itself, the business model is not that difficult. It's just deciding to do it and being determined to doing it And what they say. What do they say? Burn the ships. I don't want anybody burning the ships. I had one student when the first time I started talking to him, and he says, "Oh, I just quit my job,
Oh,
and I have enough money for 12 months." And I said, "Well, I didn't tell you to do that. I didn't tell you to do that. I don't want to be responsible for that. But let's see what we can do to get you successful." But the thing is you do have to be determined to do it.
yeah. What would you say is one of the best ways to get in contact with you and network with you, Jeff? I've seen you
Well,
talk on many stages, many podcasts. So I guess one of the network events that are coming up that you're speaking in that you would like to um, share with us, or your website.
Well, my website is synergetic.ig.com. You can see that on the screen there. You could get me at jeff@synergetic.ig.com, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Um, I do get on Clubhouse, and uh, I do have some meetups myself. In fact, I've got a virtual meetup this evening, the Ventura, uh, the Ventura County Real Estate Investors Club. I've been doing that since about 2005, but uh, you know, you've got information there. Samson's put some stuff up on the screen.
Awesome. Hey, in closing, um, is there anything you would like to leave the investors that are looking to passively invest, do as little as possible? Um, what are some ways that they can just, hey, start out here? Because this, like you said, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, it does take education. So, where would you recommend they start?
Well, like I said, there's some good books. I would start reading the books, and there's tons of podcasts out there. There's some great podcasts. Um, like I said, when I first started, there was like one real estate podcast. Now there's just hundreds of them. So get the basis of education first. That's the best way to protect yourself if you're going to be a passive investor. I've had so many of my investors that have come into my deals and looked at the numbers and said, "Oh yeah, look, that IRR is great. Wow, that's good. A lot better than I could do in the stock market." But they're trusting me and taking my word for it, and I appreciate that, and I'm honored that they trust me. But they should have some education and understanding on where those numbers came from. So education is the key. I mean, and if you don't even want to bother with that, then you go find someone like myself or someone like Samson that are going to do the work for you and do those kind of investigations for you, and you come invest with us. But that's not necessary. You could educate yourself, but the main thing is somehow get somebody else to evaluate deals with you, for you, to help you to protect yourself and not get yourself into a bad situation.
It sounds like I mean, the minimum you can start out with. I'm copying in here the chat. Let's see if this works. This is your uh, email signature. So, oh, it looks better in. I have to do some editing. Anyways, those are those are some of the ways you can connect. So Jeff, as in, oh, I'm gonna remove that. Hmm.
I can't even find my mouse. Where'd it go? There it is.
Cool.
Where's my cursor? Oh, there we go.
So I have your email, your website. Is it okay if we pitch your phone number here?
Yeah, that's all right. Now I know in Zoom you could go and you can capture the chat. Can you do this on this platform?
Um, let's find out in the backstage. We're done for today. Hey, thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time to make this happen. Uh, this is holy cow. super valuable information and content, and just wow. I believe this is great work. Great job.
Well, I wanna thank you, Samson. This is great. It's always fun talking to people. That's the part I enjoy most now.
Yeah. Hey,
So
we're gonna wrap up. So thank you for being here today, and to all our listeners, yeah, go to thank you, Rowena, Augustin. You can go to our webpage, which is capitalraisersclub.com, to find out more about not just Jeff, but other capital raisers that have come and talked on our show. And this is the website. And yeah, until next time, take care. See you.
thank you, Samson.
Gonna do the outro. 1 second.